Out of all the mixed martial arts guys I've seen transition over to boxing, Anderson Silva, at least to me, and remember, I'm a UFC mixed martial arts casual, so I haven't seen all the guys who have transitioned over, but I have seen some. For example, Michael Venom Page, obviously the guys who were on the Chiller Show last night, Victor Belfort, Tito Ortiz, and so on, and a few others over the years. But out of the ones I can remember, Anderson Silva is the most convincing as a boxer in terms of, again, MMA guys who switched over to boxing. He seems more fluid than the other guys I've seen. His technique is better. He's more relaxed, throws punches that look like boxing punches. And he was able to get Tito Ortiz out of there in one round. Now, I remember watching an interview. I can't remember the guy's name. Again, I'm an MMA casual, but I think it was a British guy. And he talked about getting into a street fight. I think he said it was him, not somebody that he was with. Getting into a street fight with Tito Ortiz in London back in the days. I think it was in central London down some back alley. And he said he knocked Tito Ortiz out and he was shocked at how easy it was in this street fight. And he said nobody believed him because, of course, Tito Ortiz was this UFC legend. Well, after seeing Anderson Silva slump Ortiz the way he did, and that was no play acting. I know what it looks like when someone gets knocked out properly. And he got knocked out properly. You can't fake those kind of body reactions. After seeing the way Silva was able to slump him like that, I'm not saying I didn't believe the story about him getting knocked out in London in that street fight, but I'm even more convinced that it's true after seeing that. Tito Ortiz just doesn't have the punch resistance for boxing. He doesn't have anything for boxing, really. The punches he was throwing looked horrible, very slow, very sluggish. He's just not built for the sport at all. Doesn't have the correct body mechanics for boxing. And, in something like MMA, if you've got a weak chin, you can disguise it, right? If you're a really good wrestler, like Ortiz, I'm assuming he was a good wrestler, right? Or else, how was he so successful in the sport? How was he able to avoid getting chinned all the time? So I have to imagine he was a good wrestler. And there are other fighters in the UFC, in mixed martial arts, who are good wrestlers that don't have good chins. And so their whole thing is avoid getting cracked on the chin, manage to take down your opponent, get him on the ground, and then you can win the fight that way, rather than being on your feet and trading blows. In boxing, of course, you don't get the option to do that. You have to stand and duke it out fist to fist. And that is just not Tito Ortiz's game at all, as we saw here. He was woefully inaccurate, slow. Silva was able to slip and slide and easily evade Ortiz's very crude attack, and then countered with one punch. He might have followed up with another, which knocked Tito Ortiz out cold. And that's all she wrote. And Silva, in the post-fight interview or press conference, talked about how he's trained boxing his whole career. I know most MMA guys train some boxing, but the way he was carrying on was like, no, he's really loved boxing all along. Even though he was in UFC, in MMA, when he was younger, he wanted to be a boxer. He had ambitions to be a boxer. But it just so happens he got into MMA professionally instead. And based upon what I saw there, bear in mind, Anderson Silva is, in his 40s? Based upon what I saw there, if he had turned his hand to boxing in his teens or 20s, he might have made something of himself. Because again, he's got some decent little technique there. He anticipates punches very well. And I know he was always good with his fists, even in UFC. But again, in boxing, it's a different level of pugilism than UFC. UFC is tremendous, right? MMA is tremendous in terms of all-round fighting, mixed martial arts. But in terms of specializing in pugilism, fist fighting, boxing is where it's at, obviously. That's where you find it at the highest level, higher than anything you'll see in MMA. And Anderson Silva obviously beat Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. last time out, who, again, is a trained, I was going to say real boxer, but a lot of boxing fans will say, no, don't call him a real boxer. He was only ever a guy living off his dad's name, right? But he's been boxing since he was very young. Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. Think whatever you want about him. Boxing professionally for many, many years. Anderson Silva wasn't boxing professionally. He was fighting mixed martial arts, but not boxing. So you've got to give Anderson Silva credit there against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr., a guy much younger than him, way more pro boxing experience, was able to get the win there. This time out against one of his contemporaries from UFC, total mismatch. The boxing ability of Anderson Silva is just streets and streets and streets ahead. of Tito Ortiz, obviously. I'd personally like to see Anderson Silva face Victor Belfort next if they can make that fight. I suspect it will be more difficult than the Ortiz fight, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know that much about Victor Belfort. I'm just judging him on the Holyfield fight. Those of you who know a lot more about Victor Belfort, tell me what you think in the comments below. Do you think he'd be a lot more competitive against Anderson Silva in a boxing match than Tito Ortiz was? And it's hard to not be more competitive than Tito Ortiz, right? But still, let me know what you think about it and let me know if it's a fight that you guys would like to see. Also, let me know how you feel about Anderson Silva in professional boxing, whether you like it or dislike it, and if you do like it, who you'd like to see him face next.